The top stories tonight in Y News. The government's pandemic task force has allowed higher education institutions to hold face-to-face classes up to 100% classroom capacity as long as participating students are registered to any health insurance covering expenses for COVID-19.
The Food and Drug Administration has granted an emergency use authorization to Pfizer's COVID-19 treatment drug Paxlovid.
The government will begin distributing fuel subsidy to public utility vehicle drivers and operators beginning next week. The LTFRB reminds grantees must have cash cards to avail it.
Russia has announced an export ban for more than 200 products after its economy was hit by sanctions from Western countries over the invasion of Ukraine.
Good evening, Philippines and the world. We are now reporting live from Quezon City, and today is Friday, March 11, 2022. Join us in the next hour as we deliver today's top stories around the Philippines and in other parts of the world. I am William Theo.
We are also seen in 1,935 satellite monitoring centers nationwide and via live streaming worldwide through the UNTV News and Rescue social media accounts and our website, untvweb.com. I am Herlene Delgado.
First in the news, universities and colleges under Alert Level 1 areas are now allowed to hold face-to-face classes at 100% classroom capacity. However, participating students must be registered to any medical insurance to cover their expenses if they contracted COVID-19. Rosalie Cos will tell us why.
The Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases have approved the recommendations of the Commission on Higher Education or CHED for the conduct of limited face-to-face classes in areas under Alert Level 1. Among this, higher education institutions shall ensure that students who will participate in the conduct of in-person learning are registered with PhilHealth or with equivalent medical insurance to cover medical expenses related to COVID-19. It is recommended that students above 21 years old may enroll in PhilHealth as indigent members with the basis the student has no visible means of income, while students below 21 years old may be classified as dependent of their parents or legal guardians.
Kailangan nakarehistro sa PhilHealth o may katumbas na medical insurance which covers medical expenses related to COVID-19 as either direct or indirect contributor.
Participants in the limited face-to-face classes shall be fully vaccinated, including the teaching, non-teaching personnel, and students. A maximum of 100 seating capacity is allowed in classrooms.
Nasa maximum po of 100% capacity naman ang seating capacity ng mga classrooms sa kolehiyo sa mga lugar na nasa Alert Level 1.
Meanwhile, the unvaccinated or partially vaccinated students shall continue under flexible learning modalities. The higher educational institutions in areas under Alert Level 1 shall take the self-assessment checklist and can continue to get the technical assistance from respective local government units, local IATF, CHED Regional Office, and experts group. The HEIs will have the discretion to choose which learning modalities should they operationalize as long as there will be continuity of learning under flexible learning modality. Meanwhile, no restrictions will be implemented as to the operation of student dormitories, but HEIs must coordinate first with their LGUs before opening. Rosalie Cos, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
The Department of Education will allow schools to adopt a hybrid setup when it comes to the graduation rites for school year 2021 to 2022. Janice and Henta reports why.
The Department of Education or DepEd has released its recommended guidelines for conducting limited face-to-face graduation ceremony for school year 2021-2022. Based on the DepEd's guidelines, schools are allowed to combine a virtual and physical graduation, which they call a hybrid graduation. Limited face-to-face graduation ceremony will be allowed in areas under alert levels 1 and 2 and will only be limited to kindergarten, grade 6, and grade 12 students. Only teachers, students, parents, or guardians and school staff can attend the physical ceremony.
Pwede po na maging hybrid, face-to-face, pwede rin pong virtual po. Depende po doon sa kalagayan ng kinalalagyan ng mga paaralan nila at sa konsultasyon sa mga magulang at saka sa LGU.
Limited face-to-face set-off is also allowed for recognition or moving up ceremony for grades 1, 2, 5, and 11. Meanwhile, DepEd announced that the end of school year 2021-2022 will be on June 24. But according to Education Secretary Leonor Briones, not all schools would have the same end of school year schedule. Briones explains several schools have extended the school calendar due to the delayed reopening of classes because of COVID-19 restrictions.
There will be places na siguro mauna sila. Mayroon ding mga schools na medyo mahuhuli sila. Hindi talaga na exactly the same. Mayroon tayong official calendar pero pwedeng i-adjust kung may mga bago at hindi inaasahang pangyayari.
Republic Act 11480 or the law extending the school calendar for basic education states that a school must complete 209 school days to perform all its activities. Janice Hente, UNTV, News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
Meanwhile, the National Task Force Against COVID-19 views the declaration of Alert Level 0 in the country is still too soon. JP Nunez explains why.
The National Task Force Against COVID-19 is not yet discussing the possibility of another COVID-19 variant that may enter the country. With this reason, the NTF thinks it is still premature to place areas under Alert Level 0 despite days of continuous decline in COVID-19 cases. In addition, Delta Cron is still a threat as experts say it has traits both from Omicron and Delta variant which cause surges in other countries.
For me, it's too early. Too early. We still have wala pa tayong 1 month sa Alert Level 1 eh. And I think we need to experience at least 2 months or 3 months na sa Alert Level 1 before we can declare Alert Level 0.
NTF Chief Implementer Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. explains that the only factor the country will implement Alert Level 0 is when the World Health Organization announces the COVID-19 pandemic is over and the world is now facing an endemic stage. Galvez said Alert Level 0 will mean mandatory wearing of face masks will be lifted and health restrictions will be eased. As of now, it will be safe not to downgrade restrictions and to not take down our guards against COVID-19.
And pagka sinabi natin Alert Level 0, ibig sabihin parang normal na. Tatanggalin na natin lahat ang ating mga restrictions. So ang isang precondition na namin doon na napag-agrihan namin is we will wait for the advice of the WHO. If the WHO will lift yung pandemic status ng buong tinatawag natin the global conditions of being an endemic, tsaka tayo magkakaroon ng tinatawag natin na Alert Level 0.
However, the National Task Force supports the call of economic sector to downgrade the whole country to Alert Level 1. This is to cushion the impact of the economic crisis driven by the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Since we are not yet placed under Alert Level 0, the government continue its call to the public to get vaccinated against COVID-19. JP Nunez, UNTV, News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
The Philippine Food and Drug Administration has granted an emergency use authorization to Pfizer's COVID-19 treatment drug Paxlovid. Aiko Miguel reports why.
Based on its emergency use authorization approved by the Philippine Food and Drug Administration, Paxlovid is prescribed for the treatment of mild to moderate COVID-19 patients ages 18 years old and above. Paxlovid can also be used for those who are at high risk for their infection to develop into a severe COVID-19 case. However, Paxlovid is not recommended for pregnant and lactating women.
Masaya ko pong binabalita sa iyo na naaprubahan na po namin ng Paxlovid kahapon. EUA po yon. So dalawa na po ang oral antiviral treatment natin against COVID-19. Paxlovid and molnupiravir.
FDA officer in charge, Director Oscar Gutierrez, added that another brand of molnupiravir was granted an EUA.
At meron pong nadagdag na isang molnupiravir na gamot. Ito po yung galing ng Bangladesh, molnupiravir po ang pangalan.
Meanwhile, the FDA has approved the shelf life extension of nearly expired AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccines. The government is finalizing its plan to donate nearly expired COVID-19 vaccines to Asian neighboring countries and even in areas in Africa with low vaccination coverage.
Sa aking pagkakaalam, unahin yung mga countries sa Southeast Asia at sa Asia, mga countries like Myanmar, Timor-Leste, at iba pa nating mga kasama sa ASEAN na kulang ang bakuna. Pero alam ko gumagawa din ng listahan ang DFA outside of ASEAN and outside of Asia. Pero hintayin na lang natin siguro yung announcement ng DFA.
Aiko Miguel, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
In other news, the Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board, or LTFRB, announces the schedule of the distribution of the 2.5 billion peso fuel subsidy to beneficiaries. The agency, however, reminds grantees should have cash cards to the fuel subsidy. Asher Kadapan Jr. details why.
Qualified beneficiaries of the Pantawid Pasada program are the first ones to receive the 6,500 peso fuel subsidy from the government. This is due to the availability of their fuel cash cards utilized in the previous fuel subsidy programs. With this, the Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board reminds the beneficiaries to have their bank cards ready for the distribution of the 2.5 billion peso fuel subsidy.
Sa mga drivers and operators po natin, yung ating card po, no, sana po ay hanapin na po natin, hindi mawawala. Kasi yun po yung unang-una po no, na i-credit doon. Yung pondo po na 6,500 per unit.
On the other hand, other beneficiaries excluded in the Pantawid Pasada program may visit the LTFRB regional office in their area. They may seek information from the local offices of the agency about the schedule of the availability of their bank cards. The LTFRB confirms that they will begin distributing the cash aid on Tuesday through the Land Bank of the Philippines.
Release na po ng DBM po no, yung ating pondo para sa fuel cash subsidy. And then papasok na po sa account po mismo ng LTFRB sa Land Bank yung pondo, kaya po sa Tuesday po ay magsisimula na po yung ating distribution sa ating mga beneficiaries po.
The LTFRB, however, targets to release the implementing guidelines for the distribution of the fuel subsidy as early as Monday of the following week. Asher Kadapan Jr., UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
The trade and industry warns manufacturers and retailers not to use the Ukraine-Russia tension to increase commodity prices. Eileen Cerudo will tell us why.
Manufacturers and retailers have a 3-month stockpile unaffected by rising fuel prices amid the Ukraine-Russia conflict, according to the Department of Trade and Industries. In an interview on Get It Straight with Daniel Razon, DTI Assistant Secretary for Consumer Protection Group Ann Cabuchan explains that the country is not yet experiencing the effects of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Cabuchan noted commodity prices are also not yet affected by the rising fuel prices.
Ang panawagan namin din sa mga retailers, mga negosyante, wag naman po natin gamitin yung conflict ngayon or yung rising prices of crude and oil to immediately jack up prices.
ASEC Cabuchan also warns that manufacturers and retailers can face penalties if proven to manipulate prices and are taking advantage of consumers.
Ano po natin, wag namang magsamantala dahil meron din naman po tayong mga batas against profiteering, even against unconscionable sales acts.
The department is currently coordinating with the manufacturers and retailers to discuss the country's current supply of prime commodities. It is also monitoring markets to ensure prices are still within the suggested retail price. Asla Kabuchan warns there might be effects in the country's supply chain in the future if the tension between Ukraine and Russia worsens. However, she assures the government is making preparations for the looming economic effects of the crisis abroad. Various government agencies already submitted their recommendation to the president, including DTI's recommendation to place the entire country under Alert Level 1.
Number one po na intervention is to really put the entire country under alert level 1. Kasi nakikita po natin that if there is increased economic activity, pag masigla po yung ekonomiya, we are in a better position to shield ourselves from external circumstances, yung mga nangyayari po sa labas.
Eileen Cerudo, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
For those watching our live streaming on YouTube, please click the subscribe button you see on your screen and ring the bell for notification. You may also follow us on Facebook. Following the appointments of the new Commission on Election Officials, two retired commissioners believe that it will now be faster for the poll body to decide on the pending cases they are handling. Dante Alvento will give us the details live.
Good evening, Harleen. Retired Comelec Commissioner Louis Diaz said the poll body is now on the execution phase of their plans for the 2022 elections. Everything is already in place. The members of the ANBank also are already complete with the recent appointments of Chairman Saidamin Pangarungan, Commissioners George Erwin Garcia and Amy Neri. Thus, they have time to deliberate cases, including 200 disqualification cases.
The assumption is, of course, they're prepared to be judges of election cases. Then perhaps they should look at, reducing the dockets of the docket of Comelec. Because in terms of the administrative work of Comelec, that is already set, long before the election. Kumbaga may compass na, and it's just a question of implementing or executing the plans.
The ANBank has also enough number to vote on cases for resolutions, including those against the presidential candidate Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Marcos Jr. still has 3 disqualification cases before the ANBank with appeals and 1 DQ case in the 2nd division.
What value added? Well, since they're +3 now, they can easily have a majority in appealed cases to the Commission and Bank.
Guanzon added Commissioner George Erwin Garcia would have much contribution for the resolutions of cases due to his expertise in election laws and experiences.
Saka yung si Garcia has a lot to contribute there in the Commission and Bank because he is an expert on election laws and rules because that's really his practice, that's his bread and butter.
Meanwhile, Harleen, Commissioner Garcia has already inhibited from the deliberations of all cases of Marcos, which is his former client. Garcia clarified it is for the sake of his commitment for impartiality over the resolution of the cases. From Quezon City, back to you, Harleen.
Thank you, Dante Almento, reporting live.
Presidential hopeful Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. is aware of the challenges awaiting for the next president of the country. This is why he called for unity among the Filipino people. Nel Maribuhok reports.
Presidential candidate Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos and his running mate Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte Carpio held a caravan in the vote-rich province of Laguna. In their campaign rally in Santa Cruz, Laguna, Marcos Jr. said he is aware of the challenges that the next president will be facing.
Maraming pagkukulang ang ating nakita nung dumating ang pandemya din sa Pilipinas. Kaya naman ay marami po tayong trabaho na haharapin sa darating na ilang taon. At napakahirap po ng trabaho na ito.
He vows to pursue the Duterte administration's Build infrastructure program and will improve healthcare facilities. In a separate statement, Marcos Jr. and Mayor Duterte promised to restore the suspended Commission on Higher Education Scholarship Program for lack of funding. The tandem stands firm in its belief that investing in the education of our youth should be a priority. Marcos and Inday Sara also stressed the importance of sustaining the education of the CHED scholars because they have the potential to become experts and leaders in their respective fields. The CSP is a merit-based program intended for the underprivileged, homeless, persons with disabilities, solo parents and their dependents, senior citizens, and indigenous people. Nel Maribuhok, UNTV News and Rescue, we serve the people, we give glory to God.
As they begin campaigning in Negros Occidental, the Lenny Kiko tandem vows to modernize and strengthen the sugar industry in the province. Meanwhile, Vice President Lenny Robredo says she is more confident to visit the so-called solid north of her rival Bongbong Marcos. This report will tell us why. The ticket of presidential candidate and Vice President Lenny Robredo is now wooing the Negrenses as part of their campaign trail. Should they win the top post, Robredo and her running mate Senator Francis Pangilinan said they will push for the development of the sugar industry in Negros Occidental, the top sugar-producing province in the country. In a radio interview, the vice president said she will push for a roadmap for the modernization of the sugar industry and establish a policy such as self-sufficiency to prevent importation. She also vowed to push for subsidies and lower production costs to cushion the impact of rising prices to local farmers. There, Robredo visited various towns and cities in the province, including San Carlos, Cabancalan, Himamaylan, and La Carlota. Meanwhile, a sea of supporters clad in pink attended the Bacolod Grand People's Rally. Citing local organizers, the Lenny Kiko team says the crowd estimate as of 6:30 p.m. was at 70,000. Robredo won in the province by a landslide in the 2016 vice presidential race. Meanwhile, Robredo says she is excited to visit the provinces in northern Luzon, or the so-called Solid North, a known bailiwick of her contender Bongbong Marcos. The vice president says she is more confident with a growing number of active volunteers on the ground.
Yung 2016, talagang pagpunta ko sa North, parang suicidal siya. In the sense na hindi mo nga alam kung may haharap sa'yo. Ngayon, iba eh. So, ngayon, para mas confident ako sa pagbisita, knowing na pagpunta namin, may mag-host sa amin, may sasalo sa amin, hindi ito available sa amin noong 2016. Yung pagpunta sa North, admittedly, kailangan mag-exert ng more effort, pero wala naman, ako basta nakapag-reach out tayo sa kanila, better than not going.
The Robredo ticket will be heading to Isabela and Cagayan tomorrow. Jorlene Delgado, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
Investigators have retrieved the flight recorder of the Airbus H125 helicopter of the Philippine National Police that crashed in Real, Quezon last February. The black box will be sent to France for further analysis. Leia Ilagan has the story.
The members of the Special Investigation Task Group consisting of CAAP, PNP, CIDG, and chopper manufacturer went in the crash site in Real, Quezon last Tuesday, March 8. PNP spokesperson Police Colonel Jean Fajardo said they retrieved several equipment including camera, vehicle, and electronic engine control. Investigators also retrieved the engine data recorder that will brought and analyzed in the Aircraft Crash Investigation Office in France.
Po yung magbibigay hinaw po kung ano po ba talaga ang naging dahilan ng pagbagsak ng chopper, kung nagkaroon po ba ng mechanical problem or human error po ba yung nangyari.
Fajardo adds the CIDG also invited two pilots to provide a statement on Monday, March 14 in connection with the accident.
Meron na po kasi sila nasubmit na affidavits din po sa PNPL unit. Subalit inabuti po ng CIDG na kuhanan pa po sila ng additional statements po to help in the ongoing investigation. Pati na rin po yung mekaniko po ng PNP aircraft kung siyang nag-conduct po ng technical maintenance inspection doon po sa chopper.
A crew member was killed while two police pilots were injured after an Airbus H125 helicopter of the PNP crashed in Real, Quezon while on an administrative mission last February. Leia Ilagan, UNTV, News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
And for the news abroad, lasting until the end of the year, Russia has limited the exports of over 200 goods out of their country to counteract Western sanctions. Ryuji Sasaki will give us the details live. Yes, Ryuji?
Good evening, Kath. In response to the Western sanctions that have limited the exports of Russian products, such as oil, Russia has decided to impose their own sanctions against unfriendly nations. The goods and products included in the sanctions are telecommunications, medical, vehicles, agricultural and electrical equipment, and timber. The restriction of ships in Russian ports were also considered. Dmitry Medvedev, the deputy head of Russia's Security Council, highlighted the difficulty these sanctions will have on foreign companies which have pulled out of the country, stating that they will struggle returning back to the market. The former prime minister added that assets left behind by foreign companies can be nationalized by Russia, as they plan to work on measures to combat losses imposed by Western sanctions. In addition, Russian President Vladimir Putin said himself that the imposed sanction will hit the rest of the world as Russian fertilizers will not be exported and Russia remains the largest producer of fertilizers. Kath?
Thank you, Ryuji Sasaki, for that live report. Negotiators will meet at the UN headquarters in New York this week to hammer out a new treaty on the oceans. Scientists and environmentalists called it a once-in-a-lifetime chance to save the high seas. Maria Latoza reports why live. Kath, the pledges made in the 2021 coalition to protect the oceans have no legal basis in the high seas. Now, negotiators in the United Nations Ocean Treaty will aim to agree on a legal framework to protect biodiversity and govern the high seas. Doug McCauley, an associate professor of ocean science at the University of California, said that this could also potentially lead to creating international parks for the first time. Scientists and experts at the High Seas Alliance describe it as the most significant ocean protection agreement for 4 decades. Currently, only 1.2% of the marine area is protected. And as a result of this, activities that exploit the high seas and their biodiversities, such as bioprospecting and seabed mining, continue to increase over the years. Shipping activities have also increased by 1,600% since 1982, which proved that the notion about the high seas being a great big empty and quiet space is just a fallacy, Macaulay said. Meanwhile, NGOs expressed concern over being excluded from this week's negotiation due to COVID-19 restrictions by the United Nations. Will McCallum, of Greenpeace, said UN's restrictions has set a worrying precedent as negotiations like these are simply too important to avoid proper scrutiny. Back to you, Kat. Thank you, Maria Letoza, reporting live. A medical procedure trialed in Sydney, Australia, was deemed as the world's first non-invasive skin cancer treatment. Nerissa Dando will give us the details live.
Good evening, Kath. A global trial of a painless non-invasive treatment was conducted on skin cancer patients in Australia. This new therapy, called Rhenium SCT, is considered the world's first non-invasive skin cancer treatment as it does not break or cut the skin. According to Dr. Sam Bora, director of Oncobet Australia Medical, the single treatment is painless and has a good cosmetic outcome. Moreover, there would be no stitches and scarring as it uses a resin base containing radioactive particles to kill non-melanoma skin cancers. Several small published studies show the effectivity of this treatment, but more evidence is required. Currently, South Coast Radiology recruits 200 patients from Sydney and Perth to offer a new procedure as part of a study. Back to you, Kath.
Thank you, Nerissa Dando, for that live report. Researchers at the University of Queensland in Australia are set to partner with biotechnology company Moderna to develop vaccines in hopes of tackling the world's greatest global public health threats. Marvi Delfin will give us the details live. The University of Queensland has been selected as one of the first institutions to have open access to Moderna's mRNA vaccine platform in hopes of laying the groundwork for fast-tracking vaccines in the event of another pandemic. Moderna President Stephen Hoge announced the technology sharing plan to allow scientists who have innovative ideas for vaccines to access resources as if they worked at Moderna. This is also part of Moderna's global health strategy, in which it has pledged to launch vaccine programs for 15 diseases that pose a threat to low and middle income nations by 2025. Among the diseases on their hit list are dengue, malaria, tuberculosis, and Zika virus, which all disproportionately affect developing countries. Microbiologist Mark Walker said they aim to have an experimental vaccine ready to be tested in animals before the end of the year. Professor Walker added that there could also be applications for bacterial diseases which are resistant to antibiotics. Moderna has also announced other partnerships under the mRNA Access Program, including a Nipah virus vaccine with the U.S. National Institutes of Health and an HIV vaccine with the Gates Foundation and the International AIDS Vaccine Initiative. Kath? Thank you, Marvi Delfin, for that report live from Australia. And those are the reasons behind the news in other parts of the globe. I'm Kat Dumaraos, live from Bangkok, Thailand. Good evening.
And before we close, we will leave you with a word, giving glory to God. From the book of Proverbs, chapter 25, verse 27, it says, "It is not good to eat much honey, so for men to search for their own glory is not glory." And those are the reasons behind the news, March 11, 2022. Reasons we deliver to you as they unfold. I am Harleen Delgado.
And because we need to know, we will always ask why. I am William Theo. We serve the people. We give glory to God.